Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a skill that's absolutely critical for any leader, how to read the world around you. We'll get into why it is so important to look up from your own internal map and really see the ocean you're sailing on.
All right, so let's just dive right in, shall we? With a really big question. With all the talent, all the resources out there, why do so many promising businesses just get lost at sea?
And you know what? The answer, a lot of the time, is pretty simple. They get so caught up in their own operations, polishing the brass, trimming their own sails, that they completely miss the massive storm brewing on the horizon, or the rival ship that's about to overtake them.
And that is why every single leader needs, well, a navigator's toolkit. In the business world, we call this external environmental analysis. It's basically the set of tools and practices that let you understand all those things happening outside your control that will, believe me, ultimately decide if you succeed or fail.
Okay, so let's start with the highest possible view, right? The biggest picture you can imagine. We're talking about the macro environment. You can think of this as the global weather patterns that affect every single ship on the sea. Doesn't matter how big or small.
And look, this isn't something you do once and then check a box. No way. It's this continuous cycle. First, you're scanning the horizon, just looking for those early signals. Then, you start monitoring them to figure out, okay, what does this actually mean? From there, you forecast, you project where these trends might be headed. And finally, you assess how important all of this is to your specific journey.
So this whole process is focused on what we call the general environment. These are the big sweeping forces in society that you have zero control over, but you absolutely have to understand if you want to survive, let alone thrive.
Now, that sounds like a lot to track, right? So to make it manageable, we break it all down into 6 key segments. And these really act like powerful, distinct global currents, and any one of them can push your business in a totally new direction.
So let's grab one of those, say the economic segment. This is all about the basic health of the economy. Are interest rates climbing, making it harder to get a loan? Is inflation eating away at your customers' wallets? Keeping an eye on these vital signs is just non-negotiable for any business.
And this is what I love about this stuff. Check this out. One single number can tell you a massive story. A super high savings rate like this one in the UAE, well, it might mean people feel confident and have money to save. Or it could mean they're worried about the future and are holding back. The key is digging in to understand the why behind that number. Okay, then you've got the socio-cultural segment. These are the big shifts in how we as a society think and feel. For example, that growing demand for better work-life balance, that's not just some fuzzy trend. It directly impacts how you have to design jobs and what kind of benefits you need to offer if you want to get and keep the best people. And of course, you can't forget the political and legal segment. I mean, this is what literally sets the rules of the game. A small change in a tax law could crush your bottom line overnight. And something like antitrust laws? They exist specifically to make sure no one company gets too big and that the competition stays fair for everyone.
All right, so we've been looking at the whole ocean. Let's zoom in a bit. It's time to map the specific waters your business is actually sailing in, what we call the industry environment.
Think of this as your immediate neighborhood, These are the factors, your suppliers, your customers, your direct rivals, whose actions have a direct, immediate impact on your success from one day to the next. This is where the action is.
So how do you map these waters? Well, luckily, we've got one of the most famous tools in all of business strategy, Porter's 5 Forces. This framework is brilliant. It helps you see the power dynamics in your industry by looking at these 5 key areas. The stronger these forces are, the tougher the competition is going to be, which usually means less profit to go around for everybody.
Okay, we're going to zoom in one more time, like right down to the surface of the water. We've mapped the shipping lane. Now let's look at the other ships sailing right there next to you, your competitors. This is where you're constantly watching what they do next.
Now, it's really easy to just think of competition as one single thing, right? But it's not. It's really a spectrum. At one end, you've got a monopoly, basically a lone ship on the water. And at the other end, you've got perfect competition, which is like a chaotic, crowded race where everyone is fighting for the same gust of wind. So on one end of that spectrum, you've got a monopoly. Think about your local utility provider like DEWA or SEWA. I mean, you don't really have another choice for your electricity, right? Because of that, they don't face a lot of pressure to compete like crazy on price or service. Okay, moving along the spectrum, you get something called avoided competition, or, the fancy term is an oligopoly. This is where you have just a few big players, like Etisalat and Do in the telecom space. They tend to try to avoid these brutal head-to-head price wars by instead carving out their own niches and competing on things like branding or special features.
Then you get to hyper-competition. And folks, this is where the gloves come off. The battle is absolutely fierce, it's relentless. The smartphone industry is a perfect example. Companies are just constantly pushing out new innovations, trying to get a temporary edge, because they know a rival is right on their heels, ready to launch the next big thing. In this world, nobody stays on top for long.
And that brings us all the way to the other end of the spectrum, perfect competition. The fast food industry is just the perfect example. As a customer, you have so many similar options, right? So if one burger joint raises its prices, you can just walk down the street to another. That intense rivalry really puts a squeeze on profits for everyone.
Okay, so we've done all this work, right? We've scanned the global weather, we've mapped the industry waters, we've sized up the other ships. What's the point of all this? Like, what do you do with it to actually chart your course?
It really all boils down to one thing: managing uncertainty. Think about it. When you're in calm, stable waters, planning is pretty easy, right? There's low uncertainty. But when the environment gets complex and unstable, those stormy seas on the right, that's when good, solid information becomes your only hope of getting through.
But here's the really important part. This isn't just about playing defense, It's not just about spotting storms and avoiding danger. It's about playing offense. When you truly understand the external environment, you can spot those favorable winds of opportunity. You can see new markets, new customer needs, new trends before anybody else does.
Because a good captain, they never stop scanning the horizon. The sea is always changing. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Think about an industry that you know really well. What's the next rising tide, that next big technological or social shift that could lift some boats and sink others?